Salve discipuli, hello 8th grade, and welcome to another lesson video. Today we're going to be talking about Latin verbs. We're going to be reviewing what you learned about verbs last year. Again, for my new students, I know this is going to be more of a kind of really fast introduction to things, but we're going to be doing lots of practice with these, and I can also give you some extra help if you need it. So just follow along. Remember to take notes as we go through these videos. I am going to do this in 2 parts, I think, because I don't want the video to go too long. So I'm going to just make sure that everything is good and we will get started. All right, so really quickly, a couple of terms that I'm going to be using as we go through this lesson. For verbs, some key terms are person. This means who is doing a verb. Number, this is going to be singular or plural. And then tense, this is when a verb is occurring. We'll talk kind of more in detail about this. These are some of the crucial key terms to know when we're talking about Latin verbs. So, quick overview. In Latin, as with in English, verbs are used to show action or a state of being. So action words like to run, to jump, to sing, to swim, things that show action, words that show action, those are verbs, same in Latin. And then state of being is kind of the slightly trickier piece. This is the verb to be. So in English, we have the verb am or is or are, depending on who it is. So if you use this to describe someone, how they're feeling, what they're like, that sort of thing. So I am happy. That am verb is not really showing an action, it's that state of being. So that's kind of where that comes into play, and Latin does this as well. Now, in Latin, and this is where it differs from English, is that there will be different forms or endings for verbs that will show things like person. As I said, person is referring to who is doing a verb. Number, whether the verb is singular or plural, and this is closely tied into who is doing the verb, as we'll see in a minute. And tense. Tense tells us when a verb is occurring. So I run, I ran, I will run, right? These are all verbs that are happening in different times. So English does this a little bit where the verb changes for the tense. Latin just does it specifically in the verb itself instead of adding like extra words like I will run. Let's let me move my face. Always have to do that. So in Latin, in your vocabulary, when you're looking at your vocab list, verbs will typically be listed with 4 forms. Right now, we're only worrying about the first 2 forms. Those are the ones we're going to be using to form the verb forms that we know so far. But the other ones will become important eventually. So it is good to start learning all 4 of those verb forms. It's how they will be listed in a dictionary, how I will give them to you in your vocab lists. And these will eventually, once we know all of the different tenses and things like that, all of those forms will be used in forming these different endings and such for verbs. So let's talk about person and number with verbs. So as I said, Latin verbs will have different endings depending on who is doing the verb. And there are going to be 6 options as to who can do a Latin verb. There's 3 singular and 3 plural. So this is why I said person and number are kind of tied together. So here's this just kind of little chart showing you all of our options for person. And we actually have these same options in English. We just don't always think about them in this way. So we have first person, second person, and third person. And each of these can be either singular or plural. So first person, we use this in English too. English first person, if a book is written or a story is written from the first person point of view, the narrator is talking about themselves. So I went to the store when I was a child, things like that. First person is you're talking about yourself. So in the singular, that's going to be I. I am doing the verb. I run, I swim, I jump. Okay, and then the plural is just the plural of I, which is if it's more than just myself doing something, it would be we. We run, we jump, we swim, so on and so forth. Now, second person is one that's not super common in English or in Latin. Second person is when you're telling someone else what they are doing. So you went to the store, you have a dog, right? So when you're describing to someone what they are doing. So the singular again is you, and in English we don't really distinguish between the singular and plural. We can use just you for both singular and plural. In Latin, when we are talking about the second person plural, I will specify you all, or sometimes I like to say y'all, just because it's fun to say, because it will have its own set of endings in Latin. So it is important to distinguish between the singular and the plural for second person. Third person is the most common one. This is the one we're going to be seeing almost entirely for the first few chapters of the textbook, which you guys have seen. This is the one we're seeing the most. I think at the end of last year, you just started getting introduced to first and second person endings for verbs, or you saw the endings of the chart. So we're going to talk about all the endings. Third person is the most common, though. So third person singular kind of covers three things. You have he, she, and it. All of these are options as to who can do it in the third person. Basically, in the third person, you're talking about something that someone else did. He went to the store. She has a dog. It ate ice cream. The it being maybe an animal or something. And then the plural of that is just if there's multiple other people you're talking about, that's going to be they. They went to the store, they have a dog, such like that. So again, this is going to be the most commonly used form that we're going to see in Latin. First and second person are more often used in dialogues that we'll see. All right, and then tense, we're going to cover this, and then we will stop and move on to a second video, just so these videos aren't too long. So tense is going to be covering when an action is occurring. As of right now, you've only learned one tense. There are 6 tenses total. I believe we'll be learning 2 more of the tenses in stage 5 or 6, I think, is where you learn 2 more tenses. But right now, we're focusing on the present tense. Present tense is action that is occurring right now in the present. So not present as in like, oh, I'm giving you a present. It's the present tense is in the present right now. So an example of this is the dog sits in the garden or the dog is sitting in the garden. So this is something really important that I want to kind of get across or remind you of, those of you who had Latin last year. In Latin, there's one form for present tense, but when we translate a present tense verb from Latin into English, we do sort of have 2 options as to how we can translate it. Like we see here, the dog sits in the garden, or you can say the dog is sitting in the garden. So these are both correct ways of using the present tense in English, and when you're translating a present tense verb from Latin into English, you can use either of these options for how you want to translate that verb into English. So I think that's all I have. Yes. So we'll do the next part in part 2. So this is just part 1. Again, trying to keep these videos a little bit shorter for you guys. Take notes on what person, number, and tense are, what our options for who can do a verb are. And in our next video, we will get more into the actual Latin endings themselves. So, walete, and I'll see you in part 2.